The gospel we just heard is one that it presents a number of questions for me. The most important of them, at least I think, is what was Jesus thinking he was doing? At least one approach to getting into this gospel episode is suggested by the book we used last year in our Lenten series called The Last Week. It suggested that Jesus was making a deliberate statement and challenge to the powers that be, and did so beginning with the way he came into Jerusalem. To set it in context, remember that it was Passover week. People from all over Judea and beyond were coming into Jerusalem to celebrate the deliverance from oppression in Egypt. The city would have been crowded, and there would have been a certain fervor in the air around the idea of deliverance and freedom. That would not have been a comforting thought for the Roman authorities, since they were the forces of occupation. Indeed, we can imagine another procession coming from the other direction, led by the imperial standards and consisting of troops to reinforce the garrison already in Jerusalem. And then, to add more to the atmosphere, recall that in those days, the lamb that was to be the center of the Passover meal was brought to the temple to be sacrificed and prepared for cooking. Throughout the week, there would have been the odor of blood running in the city to heighten the tension of the crowds and between the crowds and the Roman troops. Into this already tense situation, Jesus decides to enter in a particular way. He draws two of his followers aside and gives them a mission. Go into the village ahead of you, and as you enter it, you'll find tied there a colt that's never been ridden. Untie it and bring it here. If anyone asks you, why are you untying it? Just say this: the Lord needs it. The two disciples go and find the colt. The question is asked and the password is given. The Lord needs it. It's an odd beginning to this story. There's the suggestion of secrecy and premeditation. Arrangements are made, plans are formulated, and in the end, the transfer goes off without a hitch. It's a little like a Cold War story by John le Carré of a Berlin Wall encounter in that space between freedom and captivity. In the next scene, Jesus moves from being the orchestrator of events to someone literally going along for the ride. The disciples bring the colt and, as the gospel tells us, set Jesus on it, which could mean anything from giving him a boost to physically picking him up and putting him on them. The energy is now coming from those surrounding Jesus. They're the instigators. The people throw their cloaks on the ground before Jesus as he starts to ride down the mountain. When Jesus begins his journey into the holy city, excited crowds soon surround him. They've heard that this prophet heals, feeds, raises from the dead. Perhaps he will solve all their problems. Perhaps he will throw the occupying Romans out and restore the Jewish kingdom. Is this man indeed the chosen one? Others have pronounced themselves to be the Messiah and have proven to be no such thing. Yet the hopes, the aspirations, the demands of the people remain high. Maybe this time God will act. Jesus' followers were caught up in this excitement. All their fears about Jesus entering Jerusalem, his words about being killed there, are forgotten in the excitement of this reception. They must have felt very important, those disciples, as the crowds cheered. They must have felt like the companions of David as he danced before the Ark of the Covenant as it was brought to Jerusalem. The story ends with Jesus in conversation, perhaps I really should say in confrontation, with some Pharisees who ask him to make his disciples settle down. Luke doesn't tell us why they do this. Maybe they disapprove of the disciples' behavior. With so many tourists in Jerusalem for Passover, they may be wary of potential disturbance. Or maybe they are genuinely concerned for Jesus' safety. Whatever their intentions, Jesus' answer is this: if these were silent, the stones would shout out. I have to say, I don't know what to make of this story. As I said, this episode raises a number of questions for me, nor do I know really what to make of our traditional observance of Palm Sunday. We purchase palm branches and hand them out. Then we march into the sanctuary, down the hall, up the stairs, and into the sanctuary, waving our branches and singing Hosanna. We all feel the excitement and the joy of a parade, and one that we can celebrate. After all, this is a royal procession. The procession, as Luke describes it, is deliberately modeled after the words of the prophet Zechariah, telling how Israel's Redeemer will come into Jerusalem. If the story were to end here, we would all go out feeling really triumphant. But a heavy cloud of doom trails after us. Our shouts of praise are heartfelt, but there's no guile in our steps, nothing cynical in the waving of our branches. Yet we know what will happen soon. We know what it means for Jesus to set his face to enter Jerusalem for the last time. There's a dissonance inherent in our triumphant observance. Part of me agrees with the Pharisees who try to stop this cheering. Part of me wants to say, let's tone it down a little. Can't you see where this is leading? Don't you know what's waiting in Jerusalem? This is a funeral procession, not a parade. Put the palm branches down. Use your indoor voices. Then I remember Jesus' words. If these were silent, the stones would shout out. Jesus' words challenge me to take another look, to reconsider the scene, to turn my eyes from what I know lies waiting up ahead, and instead focus my full attention on the one who sits astride the colt. Jesus' words challenge me to recall his many deeds of power and to offer praise to the God who sent him into the world, to recognize Jesus for who he is and join in singing, "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord." If I don't sing, the stones will shout out. So I may as well sing. We may as well sing praise to God and to the Christ whose deeds of power have been seen by us. The Palm Sunday story calls us into an in-between space, into the space between freedom and captivity, the space between companionship and betrayal, between outrageous joy and unspeakable sorrow, the space indeed between life and death. Somewhere between Bethany and Jerusalem, a parade is forming up that also, in a certain light, looks like a funeral cortege. We know what's coming, but we're not there yet. We're in between, and we're asked to sing. It's uncomfortable singing, even as we prepare to weep, but it's the reality and it's the way of our discipleship.